Hey everybody, this is your host, Odd Job Entertainment, bringing you another video. And today we're going to be taking another look at the Constellation Mark II, a project that has frankly been the bane of my existence. So let's let past me from the stream explain why that is.
This is such a big project. Um, I think when I initially set out to do this, I probably bit off a bit more than I could chew. And I think I need to recontextualize what I'm trying to accomplish. I think I want to keep the majority of the original goals. Let me explain it this way. A lot of times when you see these engineering channels on YouTube, they are presenting a finished product, right? And they have countless footage showing the missteps along the way, but somehow they're still getting these videos out on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, and you're watching the video because they finished the project, right? So I've had that pressure, self-inflicted, of course, to want to finish a project before I make videos about it. Then you get school, you get school work and all this stuff kind of wrapped up, and like the time is gone, right? Like when am I going to work on the Constellation Mark II when I've got all this other stuff going on, right? So then it gets put to the side, and it's like that idea of getting the finished video for Constellation Mark II just goes out the window, and it just keeps getting pushed on down the road, right? I think to maintain my sanity on this project, I think I need to break this up into smaller things that are more manageable, that hopefully will still provide value to the viewer.
One of the big areas where I really kind of messed up was the pre-visualization and planning stage. I didn't take enough time to fully appreciate and understand the design language that has already been developed for existing RSI ships in Star Citizen. Images like these of the newly released Apollo Medevac and Triage would have really helped me kind of understand the design intent of the artists that work for CIG and the engineers that are working on making these digitized ships. And by not looking at these references and not paying enough attention to them, I really kind of left myself high and dry when it came to figuring out details on the fly. And that was the other thing that I really let myself down with. I would do a sketch of the outside, and then based on that sketch, I would start trying to fill in the space, and I would be coming up with details and design characteristics as I went. And that was a really dangerous practice. It led to a lot of headache and some areas where I felt like the design ended up feeling very compact in a very negative way. For instance, the canopy on the Constellation that I was designing ended up being very boxy and long, and that's not an RSI ship. That's more of an anvil thing, if anything. RSI should feel a little more sleek and refined. And basically, these kinds of things resulted from me just not having enough information before I went into the modeling stage. Taking some more time to appreciate the nuances of the design language for an RSI ship really helped me capitalize on what things should be there to make this stand out as something that for sure fits in the RSI family. For instance, there are a lot of design details that we can pick out about the RSI family in this shot of the door. If I ask you what is the focus of this image, it's pretty obvious, right? It is the door. And there's a few things that are doing that for us. There is one, almost a literal arrow pointing towards the door in the lines that lead up to the door. These are reflected in the parallel lines of the ceiling, the angled lines on the floor, and then it's further reinforced by the walls of the ship being this slanted parallel that all copy the same angle that the outside of the door has for itself. All of these serve to guide your eye towards the center of the room, which is where the door resides. And then once your eye is there, it's kind of capped off by these squat top edges of the hexagon. And what's more sci-fi than a hexagon, am I right? But instead of being a regular hexagon of all equal length sides, this one's been stretched out on the bottom so that it still forms what is essentially a wall but it keeps that sci-fi aesthetic by keeping them slanted away from the user. It's not the most practical thing in the world, but it helps with that sci-fi feeling. And for my role as a modeler, there's a couple things that I can pick out here that can actually help me speed up the process. And one is the difference between modeled details and stencils. What I was trying to do before was adding a texture to every single nook and cranny I could find, but if you look at the highlighted section here, you see that a lot of the floor is actually just one flat surface. It looks like it has the impression of a three-dimensional space, but that's most likely some trickery done with the texture or shader pack. You can mimic physical geometry by just changing the way that light bounces off in a video game. And I can take advantage of that by using decals and stencils instead of having to model every single facet of a feature. That's going to save me a lot of time on these things that would be otherwise so small you can't appreciate, but I can just do a big stencil and achieve most of the same effect for much less effort. Now that we've moved into Krita and we're starting the drawing process for the exterior, this is where the difference in process is really going to stand out. This time I have some rough shapes for the interior of the ship, some blocked out rooms, very basic, but it gives me the primary dimensions that I need to respect when I'm drawing this top view of the ship. And that's going to be extremely helpful in figuring out just how I can get everything to fit, for one, and then also make them feel like a cohesive design. And you can see I'm struggling a little bit with the canopy here. I'm not super thrilled with how the first iteration came out, making it a little longer, trying some different shapes, but because I have the cockpit more or less roughed out, I can do much faster iterations on this 2D side of things instead of having to commit all of the effort into 3D modeling it and then seeing if it looks good then. I can try those out at a much cheaper from the effort point of view perspective of just doing some sketches. And I can also kind of see how these shapes are going to start to stack up. I can see how my repeated lines are going to flow into each other. I can start to envision how this is going to come together. And you can see that I can make adjustments based on that information much more easily than if I didn't have all of this information in front of me right at the start. And that's one of the things that really led to a lot of the issues that I didn't like about where the previous design was going. There were elements that started to feel cramped. I was not a fan of the turbines for the vertical thrusters, for instance. Those felt like an afterthought. I knew I wanted them because they looked cool, and chat was very adamant that they be there, for one. But it just wasn't fitting the way that it was supposed to. But with this process instead, I can map out very clearly where I want them to go, and I can get a much better result in the end. And here we're landing on a canopy shape that I do actually quite like. It's the right amount of length, and then tapering in the front edges of our arrowhead, I think really helps tie that front end together in a way that would have been much more difficult to arrive at if I was starting straight from the 3D process. In the same spirit, now we can add in those turbine shapes and we can give them plenty of space, make them feel like they belong there. They're not just an afterthought this time, they are planned right from the get-go. I know where they belong, and they're in just the right position relative to the room that they're supposed to be next to. And other details like windows and portholes, these are all made easier by having the exterior respect the interior in this drawing stage. So at this point, I'm really optimistic that this process is going to work much, much better. And instead of trying to do the exterior and then force the interior to fit it, now we're going to have everything be a little more cohesive right from the start. So adding in extra details after the fact, much easier to consider them. And I could even come back to this sketch in the future and add on to it more to try out other details that I hadn't thought about when I'm doing the 3D modeling. Instead of having to fully model something to see how it looks, I'll just come back to the sketch. It's to scale, So I won't have any issues getting that back into the 3D modeling after I find a solution I like. And that's exactly what we're seeing here with the cutouts. They looked really cool on the original model that we were working with, but again, they felt like a bit of an afterthought. Now I can try out different kinds of shapes, see what I like, and if I don't like it, it's gone. It's really pretty easy. Essentially, the big advantage here is I'm able to test out a lot of things without making a huge commitment to any of them. I can get an idea as to what's going to look good without having put in the greater effort that comes on the 3D modeling side. And I do have to apologize a little bit. As I'm listening to myself in the recording studio, I'm picking up on that nasally tone. I am still getting over a little bit of a cold flu that I had this last week. It really knocked me on my butt. I was able to stream, and I'm recording this video now, but if you don't hear those typical chocolatey tones of my voice, that would be why. I'm still a little sick, so I apologize. It is what it is. I am only human after all. Now we've jumped forward quite a bit in the design process here. We've got some windows mapped out by the teal color in the image. And this is something that's really important for a ship like the Constellation. One, because RSI is a higher end brand within the game, so it is going to have a bit more of the creature comforts that us humans tend to enjoy. Windows are one of them. I don't know why CIG and Star Citizen are so averse to adding windows, but we've got so many beautiful environments to see. It's a shame that if you are deep inside a ship, you don't get to enjoy them. And it's also an area that with the previous design of the ship, I really was not thrilled with how they were turning out. The porthole for the shared living space, it just felt like it was a tunnel. It was so deep inside the hull of the ship that it just didn't feel like it would be very inviting to look out of. So I really wanted to focus on that and fix that with this iteration. So windows are being considered right from the start. They're part of this initial layout so that I can know exactly where they're going to go. And there's a lot that ties into that. I need to figure out a way to add some transparent materials to the model to actually make those windows somewhat usable from a play features point of view. And I also need to have them be considered so that as I'm modeling them, I know where they go and I know what their size needs to be. It's also something that's unique to the Constellation because there is the Phoenix variant, and surely a luxury liner like the Phoenix is going to have even more windows, right? Like, you want your passengers to enjoy their trip, and if they feel like they're in a box, they're not going to enjoy it. So yeah, lots of windows, lots of glass. This baby is going to be crystal. Now we're getting to a point where we're adding in the engines for the Constellation. These are heavily inspired by the Apollo. It's got the same kind of dangly bits that the Apollo has, and I think right now I'm actually showing that I needed to plug in my headphones and get them charging. Ironically, I wasn't using them for anything at the time. I just habitually put my headphones on when I start streaming, and then I realized like 30 minutes into the stream that I'm not actually using them because there's no videos being watched. So I had to take them off. Anyways, back to the design. Heavily inspired by the Apollo engines. They still have a lot to do with the previous design that we had done, but there's going to be some more refined details being put in. Now that I have more ships to pull from in the game, it's easier to not have to come up with the details myself. I can just look at what CIG has done and copy some of those and adapt them to the Constellation. Remember, we're going for something that blends the previous family and the new family a little bit. We want this to be kind of like a missing link. So we want the engines to reflect that as well. The engines on the original Constellation, pretty rounded off in a lot of areas. They're much more of an organic shape compared to the heavy angular nature of the newer RSI ships. But I think the Apollo does a pretty good job of finding a balance where they still feel kind of flowy, little bit of organic shapes in there, but it's very clearly leaning into the newer design language. There's also a major thing that I want to fix with this iteration, and that was the fact that my engines didn't move on the bottom. One of the iconic details of the Constellation in the game is when you go into landing mode, the bottom thrusters move forward, and then your landing gear deploy from those thrusters. In my design, I was just anchoring them statically in that forward position, and it limited a little bit of what I was able to accomplish with that arrowhead shape we were going for. I had to bring the engines in so that they wouldn't feel too wide, and you can see that reflected in the drawing here. If those engines were stuck in that position, the ship would feel way too wide at the haunches. But it's okay for landed mode because you want the ship to feel like it is stable, and that's part of why we wanted to move them forward in the first place. If we can get the engines to sit directly below the center of gravity for the model, that means that the model will feel very stable when it's sitting on a table. That's a funny alliteration. I think alliteration is the right word. Stable on a table. But when we want to pick this thing up and whoosh it around the bedroom, or wherever you happen to have your PC rig set up, you want these to be able to zip towards the back so that it feels like a faster, more aggressive ship. So I don't want to give up on that this time around. I want to make sure that I actually build that kind of feature into it. I've got some ideas of how I can achieve the mechanics in a compact space. That's really where a lot of these challenges come into. I have an idea of what I want to accomplish, but then it comes down to how can we do that cheap, reliably, and in a way that isn't going to feel janky, right? Like it needs to feel good, otherwise it's not worth doing. And getting all of those to match up at the same time, cheap, reliable, not janky, it's like one of those pick two, you can't have three. But in this case, we're just going to have to try and figure out how to get all three. It's got to feel good, and it's got to be something that people can repeat at their home. So it's just got to be good. That's the long and short of it. And then we're going back over the windows, just adding some more details, making them feel more like a intended feature. They were kind of squished in as an afterthought on the previous version. And you'll hear that phrase a lot when I'm talking about the previous version, afterthought. Again, I wasn't giving myself enough information at the start of the design process, so I was trying to figure out a lot of things on the fly, and that's just not an effective means of getting things done in CAD. CAD is very good once you know what you're making, but it's not the best for doing an exploration. So, what do you do for an exploration? Well, you do stuff like this. You do sketches. And so, again, I'm really optimistic that this is going to hopefully be the last time that I have to design a constellation. I do want to get this project finished. I want to get it in your guys' hands. I want to get it so that you guys can build some of these yourself, build along with me, and enjoy the process. And I just need to stick to the basics. It's like with anything, right? If you skip out on the fundamentals, the more advanced stuff, it's not going to flow right. Now we're at a point where I feel like the sketch is defined enough that all I can really do at this point is just give myself some more information about the form by adding in some very basic levels of shading. You guys have seen some of the artwork I've done on the channel. Am I the most amazing artist? Certainly not. There's definitely artists that are better than me. Is this my best work for a sketch? Also no. This is very quick. It's intended that way. I'm not trying to spend 20 hours making a rendering of this ship with a pen. I just want to give myself the information that I need to get started and get going on something. This is also not going to be the only sketch that I do. This is an overall layout sketch, but it's far and away not the only defining sketch. Now, when I get to designing the turbine section, for instance, I'm going to be doing a sketch of that section and figure out all those details before I start the modeling, so that when I do the modeling, it's much more of a planned route. I'll be able to much more quickly land on the final design because I already have most of the decisions made, so I'm just recreating them in 3D. And, you know, again, for the cockpit, like the cockpit is going to need plenty of auxiliary sketches to inform its design. I need to figure out what the doors are going to look like. I need to figure out what the stairways are going to look like. What are the control panels going to look like? What are the seats going to look like? All these things need to be figured out beforehand in order to really be effective on the CAD side. And that's just something that I really skipped out on trying to rush things, and it's bitten me in the butt. Here we are redoing everything because I just was not happy with the way it looked. So take it from me, learn from my mistakes, start with the basics, get really good at the basics, figure out everything you can before you go into that more complex modeling stage. Figure out, is there anything else that I can learn before I get to that point? And try and have it all figured out before then. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And there we go. Here is our final sketch of the night. It's got enough detail to inform me on the form, but without getting too overwhelming. I'm going to be doing plenty of supplementary sketches later on. And as I close out, I just want to thank the channel members, John Best and The Prime. Your financial support really helps me make great content like this. I hope it's great. I've been told it's some of the greatest content ever made, but I would never say that of myself. People tell me all the time, you're such a great content creator. I say, oh no, that can't be true. You guys are too kind. But your support really does mean a lot. If you have the means to do so, I would greatly appreciate you becoming a channel member yourself. But short of that, hey, subscriptions are free. So if you enjoyed this content and want to see more of it, as well as terrible impersonations later on, feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. But until next time, this is Odd Job Entertainment, signing off.